I stepped through the front door of my childhood home, my military duffel bag heavy on my shoulder, and breathed in the familiar scent of my mother's cinnamon candles mixed with pine from the Christmas tree. After 8 months deployed as a combat medic in overseas operations, everything felt surreal and precious. The warmth of the house wrapped around me like a hug I desperately needed. My 17-year-old daughter, Emma, looked up from her phone on the couch, her face lighting up with pure joy as she jumped up to embrace me. "Mom, you're finally home!" she squealed, and I held her tight, feeling her grow taller since I left. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, pulling back to study her face. "Tell me honestly, was the $2,000 I sent each month enough for everything you needed?" Emma's bright smile faded into genuine confusion. "What money, Mom?" she asked innocently. I watched my parents exchange terrified glances from across the room, while my sister Jessica suddenly started discussing Christmas dinner plans loudly. The room filled with suffocating silence. My heart hammered against my ribs as I studied Emma's genuinely bewildered expression. Something was catastrophically wrong. "Emma, honey, can you show me your bank statements and college savings account?" I asked, gently trying to keep my voice steady despite the growing panic clawing at my chest. Emma looked even more confused as she grabbed her laptop from the coffee table. "Mom, I don't really have much saved. I've been working part-time at Brewster's Coffee downtown to save money for community college because I thought we couldn't afford a real university." The words hit me like shrapnel. I had specifically sent money every month to ensure Emma could focus on her studies and college applications instead of working. My father cleared his throat nervously from his recliner. "Sue, sweetheart, those money transfers might have been delayed in processing, you know how banks can be during the holidays." My mother wrung her hands in her lap, her wedding ring sliding around her thin finger. "These financial systems are so complicated nowadays, honey. Maybe there was some kind of mix-up." Jessica suddenly became very interested in straightening the Christmas stockings hanging from the mantel. "Oh, Sue, you must be exhausted from traveling. Why don't we focus on having a nice family dinner tonight instead of worrying about boring financial stuff?" I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app with deliberate calmness, the way I had learned to stay controlled during medical emergencies in the field. My deployment pay had been automatically transferring $2,000 monthly to my father's account with clear memo notes reading, "For Emma's education and expenses." $16,000 over 8 months, all sent exactly as planned. "Dad," I said quietly, turning my phone screen toward him, "this shows every transfer I made to your account. $16,000 marked specifically for Emma. Where is that money?" My father's face drained of color as he stared at the screen. His hands shook slightly as he reached for his reading glasses. There might have been some investment complications, Sue. Sometimes these financial advisors, they promise things that don't work out the way you expect." My mother started crying softly, dabbing her eyes with a tissue from the box on the side table. "Sue, please don't ruin Christmas over this. We're all together, that's what matters most." Emma looked back and forth between us, her confusion transforming into dawning horror. "What's happening?" "Grandpa, did something happen to money Mom sent for me?" I sat down beside Emma on the couch, taking her hands in mine. They felt cold and small, reminding me of when she was little, and I would comfort her after nightmares. "Emma, before I deployed you, had a college fund that your grandfather was managing. Can you tell me what happened to that?" My father struggled to his feet, gripping the arms of his recliner. "Now, Sue, that's not fair. I did my best to handle those investments responsibly." "What investments?" I asked, my voice still calm but with steel underneath. "I put that money in a simple savings account specifically to avoid any risk." Jessica dropped the stocking she was holding and turned around with panic written across her face. "Look, I really need to check on my kids next door. Brad's probably wondering where I am." She started moving toward the door with obvious desperation. "Jessica, sit down," I said firmly, using the command voice I had developed during my medical training. "Nobody's leaving this room until we sort this out." The silence stretched between us like a rubber band about to snap. My father sat back down heavily, his breathing labored. My mother's tears fell more freely now, and Emma squeezed my hands tighter as she began to understand that something terrible had been hidden from both of us. "Dad," I said, looking directly into his eyes, "I need you to tell me exactly what happened to Emma's college fund and the money I've been sending. No more excuses, no more delays. The truth." My father's shoulders sagged as if the weight of his secrets was finally crushing him. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Sue, I've been gambling online. The college fund is gone, all of it. And the money you've been sending, I lost that too. I thought I could win it back before you came home, but it just kept getting worse." The room felt like it was spinning around me. 8 months of deployment pay plus Emma's original college savings, all gone. My daughter's future stolen by the very people I trusted most. But then I noticed Jessica's face, and I realized this betrayal ran even deeper than I had imagined. I stood up slowly, my military training helping me maintain composure, even as rage built inside my chest. "Emma, would you mind watching television in the living room for a few minutes? I need to talk to your grandparents privately." Emma nodded silently, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. She grabbed the remote and moved to the far end of the couch, turning up the volume on a Christmas movie to give us privacy, while staying close enough to feel safe. I walked into the kitchen and my parents followed reluctantly, their movements heavy with shame. Jessica lingered in the doorway, clearly wanting to escape but not daring to leave. "Dad, how much money are we talking about total, I asked, leaning against the kitchen counter with my arms crossed. The granite felt cool against my back, grounding me in reality. My father slumped into one of the wooden chairs around the kitchen table, his head in his hands. "The original college fund was $10,000. With the money you sent over 8 months, we're looking at $26,000 total. $26,000 of my daughter's future," I said quietly. "How exactly does someone lose that much money gambling online?" My mother sat down beside him, her face pale and drawn. "Sue, your father got involved with these gambling websites that seemed legitimate at first. They had all these bonuses and promotions that made it look like easy money." "Easy money," I repeated, tasting the bitterness of those words. "While I was treating wounded soldiers overseas, you were gambling away my daughter's education." Jessica finally entered the kitchen, completely closing the door behind her. "Sue, there's something else you need to know." I turned to look at my sister, noting how she wouldn't meet my eyes. Jessica had always been the family peacemaker, the one who tried to smooth over problems instead of confronting them directly. But something in her posture told me she was about to reveal something even worse. "What else, Jessica?" I asked. She took a shaky breath. "Some of that money. The monthly money you were sending. I've been receiving portions of it for my family's expenses. Dad was giving me $800 each month, telling me it was from his retirement income to help with my kids' school costs." The kitchen fell silent except for the humming of the refrigerator and the distant sound of the Christmas movie playing in the living room. I stared at Jessica, trying to process what she had just admitted. "You knew where that money was coming from," I said. "It wasn't a question." Jessica's face crumpled. "I suspected, but I didn't want to ask too many questions. Brad lost his job 6 months ago, and we were desperate. I told myself that Dad wouldn't do anything to hurt Emma." I felt something cold and sharp settle in my stomach. My own sister had been complicit in stealing from her niece while I was deployed and vulnerable. "So while Emma has been working at a coffee shop to save money for community college, you've been using her college fund to pay for your kids' private school tuition." "It's not that simple, Sue," Jessica protested weakly. "Actually, it is exactly that simple," I replied. "You both stole from a child while her mother was serving overseas." My father looked up from his hands, his eyes red with tears. "Sue, I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I could replace the money before you came home. The gambling sites made it seem so easy to win back what I had lost." I pulled out my phone again and started scrolling through my banking records more carefully. "Show me Dad's account statements for the past 8 months, I said. "I want to see exactly where every dollar went." My mother stood up abruptly. "Sue, maybe we should wait until after Christmas to deal with all this financial business." "Mom, sit down," I said firmly. "We're dealing with this right now." As my father reluctantly retrieved his laptop to show me his banking history, I noticed Jessica checking her phone with a worried expression. She was typing a text message quickly, then deleting it, then typing again. "Jessica, who are you texting?" I asked. She looked up guiltily. "Nobody important. Just letting Brad know I'll be late getting home." But something in her eyes told me she was lying about that too. I was beginning to realize that the financial theft was just the beginning of this betrayal, and there were more secrets waiting to be uncovered. My father opened his laptop with trembling fingers, and as the banking website loaded, I saw his face go from pale to ashen gray. "Dad, what is it?" I asked. He turned the laptop screen toward me, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. Along with the gambling website transactions, there were multiple entries for cash advances and high-interest loans. But it was the name on the most recent transactions that made me understand we were dealing with something far more dangerous than simple gambling addiction. The transactions were marked as payments to VT Financial Services, and there were phone numbers I didn't recognize along with amounts that had been growing larger each month. "Dad," I said slowly, "who is VT Financial Services?" The look of pure terror that crossed his face told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just about gambling anymore. My family had gotten involved with people who made their money by preying on desperate families, and Emma and I were now targets in a game we didn't even know we were playing. My father's hands shook as he scrolled through more banking transactions, revealing a pattern that made my combat medic training kick into high alert mode. Multiple cash advances from different sources, wire transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, and most disturbing of all, regular payments to VT Financial Services that had been increasing in amount every single month. "Dad, I need you to explain exactly what VT Financial Services is, and I need you to tell me right now," I said, using the same voice I used when treating critical patients who needed to focus through their pain. He closed his eyes tightly as if shutting out the world could make this conversation disappear. "Sue." I got in over my head with the gambling debts. The websites I was using, they offered credit, and when I couldn't pay that back, they connected me with a lending service that could help consolidate everything. "A lending service," I repeated. "You mean loan sharks?" My mother gasped and pressed her hand to her chest. "Harold, you told me those were legitimate business loans." "I thought they were," he said desperately. At first, the terms seemed reasonable. VT Financial Services presented themselves as a family-friendly lending company that specialized in helping people with gambling debt get back on their feet. Jessica, who had been unusually quiet during this exchange, suddenly spoke up. "Sue, there's something else you need to know about VT Financial." I turned to look at her, and the expression on her face told me I wasn't going to like what came next. "What about them, Jessica?" "They've been calling the house. A lot. And they've been asking specific questions about you, about your deployment schedule, your military pay when you were coming home." The room seemed to tilt slightly. What kind of specific questions? My father reached into a kitchen drawer and pulled out a manila folder stuffed with papers. His hands trembled as he handed it to me. They sent documentation, letters, payment schedules, even photographs. I opened the folder and felt my blood pressure spike. There were photos of our house taken from different angles, images of Emma walking to her car in the school parking lot, and even pictures of me in my military uniform that could only have been taken from my social media accounts. "They know everything about our family," my mother whispered. "Your deployment dates Emma's school schedule, even where Jessica lives." I flipped through more papers and found a contract with VT Financial Services that made my stomach drop. The terms were predatory and clearly designed to trap families in impossible debt cycles. But what made it worse was seeing my father's signature on multiple pages agreeing to payment terms that would have been impossible for him to meet even under the best circumstances. Dad, this contract shows you owe them $25,000 with interest climbing at 15% per month. How did you think you were going to pay this back? I didn't think, he admitted. I was desperate, and they made it sound like the interest rate would go down after the first few payments. They said it was just a temporary measure to help me get caught up. Emma called from the living room. "Mom, is everything okay? You guys have been talking for a long time." "We're fine, sweetheart," I called back, though nothing could have been further from the truth. "Just discussing some boring adult stuff." Jessica pulled out her phone and showed me a text message thread that made my military instincts go into full defense mode. "Sue, they've been texting me too. Look at this." The messages were from someone identifying himself as Tony from VT Financial. The tone started friendly but had gradually become more threatening over the past month. The most recent message sent just 3 days ago read, "Jessica, we know your sister is coming home for Christmas. We need to discuss payment arrangements that involve her military benefits. This situation needs to be resolved quickly for everyone's safety." "Jessica, have you been communicating with these people behind Dad's back?" I asked. She nodded miserably. "They contacted me after Dad missed a payment 6 weeks ago. They said they needed to verify family assets and income sources to restructure the loan terms." I felt ice forming in my veins. "What information did you give them?" "They already knew most of it," she said defensively. "They knew about your deployment, pay your medical training, even which base you were stationed at. I just confirmed some details about the family situation." "What kind of details, Jessica?" "They asked about Emma's college plans, whether you had life insurance through the military, what kind of benefits you receive." She paused, looking sick. "They also asked about your relationship status and whether you had any other family members who might be able to help with financial emergencies." I realized with growing horror that VT Financial Services wasn't just a loan shark operation. They were specifically targeting military families using the deployment separation to manipulate vulnerable relatives into impossible debt situations. And now they had detailed intelligence about my family's financial situation, Emma's vulnerabilities, and my military benefits. "Dad, how many other military families do you think they're targeting this way?" I asked. He looked confused. "I don't know, Sue. I thought I was the only one with gambling problems." But I was beginning to understand that his gambling addiction had been carefully cultivated and exploited by people who made their living destroying military families while their soldiers were deployed and unable to protect them. The house phone rang and we all froze. My mother looked at the caller ID and her face went white. "It's them," she whispered. "VT Financial Services." "Answer it," I said quietly. "Put it on speaker. I want to hear exactly what they have to say." My mother picked up the phone with a trembling hand. "Hello." "Mrs. Patterson, this is Tony Vega from VT Financial Services. I believe your daughter Sue is home for the holidays now. We need to schedule a family meeting to discuss resolving your husband's account balance. Is she available to speak with me directly?" I took the phone from my mother's hand. "This is Sue Patterson. Who am I speaking with?" "Sue, it's wonderful to finally speak with you directly." Tony said, his voice smooth and friendly in a way that set off every alarm bell I had developed during my military service. "I understand there may have been some confusion about your father's financial arrangements, but I'm confident we can work together to find a solution that benefits everyone." "What kind of solution?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Well, according to our paperwork, your family has significant assets and income sources that weren't being considered in your father's original payment plan. We'd like to discuss restructuring the loan terms to include your military benefits and deployment savings. This would actually reduce the monthly payment burden significantly." I felt my jaw clench. "Mr. Vega, I don't owe your company any money." "Of course not directly," he said, chuckling in a way that made my skin crawl. "But family financial obligations often require creative solutions. Your father's situation affects everyone, especially your daughter's future prospects. We're hoping to find an arrangement that protects Emma's interests while honoring the existing debt obligations." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. They were telling me that Emma's safety depended on my cooperation with their financial demands. "Mr. Vega, what exactly are you proposing?" I asked. "I think this kind of conversation is better handled in person," he replied. "Family financial planning is too important for phone discussions. Would tomorrow afternoon work for a brief meeting at your parents' house? I can bring the necessary paperwork to formalize a new arrangement that benefits everyone involved." I looked around the kitchen at my family's terrified faces and realized I was about to enter a battle that would require every bit of my military training and protective instincts. "Tomorrow afternoon is fine," I said. "What time?" "Let's say 2 o'clock, and Sue, I appreciate your willingness to work with us on this. Family cooperation makes everything so much easier for everyone involved." The line went dead, and I handed the phone back to my mother. The kitchen was silent except for the sound of our breathing and the cheerful Christmas music still playing from the living room where Emma was waiting for us to return. I had 48 hours to figure out how to protect my family from people who had been planning to exploit us for months, and I was starting to realize that everything I thought I knew about my family's situation was about to change completely. After Tony Vega hung up, I spent the next 3 hours going through every piece of documentation my father had in his manila folder. What I discovered made me understand that our situation was far worse than even I had imagined. Mixed in with the loan agreements and threatening letters were copies of documents I had never seen before, papers with signatures that looked like Jessica's handwriting. "Jessica," I said, spreading the papers across the kitchen table, "can you explain why your signature appears on financial documents related to Dad's loan?" Jessica's face drained of color as she recognized the papers. "Sue, I can explain that." "I'm listening," I said, crossing my arms and waiting. "When Dad missed his third payment 2 months ago, Tony Vega's people said they needed additional assurance that the family was committed to resolving the debt." Jessica began her words coming out in a nervous rush. "They said they needed someone with legal authority to represent the family's interests in case Dad became unable to handle his own financial affairs." I picked up one of the documents and read it more carefully. It was a power of attorney agreement giving Jessica legal authority to make financial decisions on behalf of our parents, but there were additional clauses that made my military legal training sound alarm bells in my head. "Jessica, this document gives you the authority to access my military benefits and deployment savings," I said, pointing to a specific clause buried in the legal language. "Did you understand what you were signing?" "They told me it was just a formality," she said weakly. "They said it would never actually be used, but they needed it on file to restructure Dad's payment plan." I continued reading and found something that made my blood run cold. "According to this document, you legally committed to $40,000 in debt obligations using my military income as collateral. You signed papers promising these people access to my deployment, pay my medical benefits, and even my future earnings." My father looked up from his chair in shock. "Jessica, you told me you were just signing papers to help negotiate better payment terms." "I thought I was," Jessica said, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. "But they kept bringing more documents each time I met with them, saying they needed additional assurances because Dad's situation was getting worse." "Wait," I said, setting down the papers. "You've been meeting with these people multiple times." Jessica nodded miserably. "Tony Vega asked me to meet with him and his business partner every 2 weeks to review Dad's account status. They said it was standard procedure for family-backed loans." "Where were these meetings taking place?" I asked. "Usually at the diner on Maple Street, sometimes at the Starbucks downtown," Jessica answered. "They always seemed very professional, wearing business suits and carrying briefcases full of paperwork." I felt my military instincts kicking into overdrive. "Jessica, did you ever consider that professional criminals often look exactly like legitimate business people?" "They had business cards," she protested weakly, "and they knew so much about banking and finance." My mother had been listening to this exchange with growing horror. "Jessica, honey, why didn't you tell us about these meetings?" "Because they told me Dad would be in serious legal trouble if I discussed the details with anyone outside the immediate family," Jessica explained. They said that talking to Sue while she was deployed could actually make things worse because military personnel have restrictions on civilian financial entanglements. I realized that Tony Vega's operation was far more sophisticated than a simple loan shark business. They had specifically researched military regulations and family dynamics to manipulate Jessica into believing she was protecting me by keeping secrets. "Jessica, did they ask you questions about my personal life during these meetings?" I asked. She looked guilty. "They asked about your relationship status, whether you were planning to get married or make any major life changes when you returned from deployment." "What did you tell them?" "I told them you were focused on your military career and weren't seriously dating anyone," she said. "They seemed relieved to hear that because they said it meant your financial situation would be more stable and predictable." I felt sick as I realized how much personal information Jessica had been feeding to these criminals for months. They had been building a detailed profile of my life, my income, and my vulnerabilities while I was overseas and completely unaware. "Jessica, show me every text message, every email, every piece of communication you've had with VT Financial Services," I demanded. She reluctantly handed me her phone, and I scrolled through months of correspondence that revealed the true scope of their operation. Tony Vega hadn't just been collecting information about my family, he had been manipulating Jessica into believing she was saving Dad from legal prosecution while simultaneously trapping our entire family in a web of fraudulent debt. But the worst discovery came when I found a voice recording on Jessica's phone that she had apparently forgotten about. It was from her last meeting with Tony Vega, and his voice came through clearly as he explained their next steps. "Jessica, when your sister comes home for Christmas, we'll need you to help us explain the situation in a way that makes cooperation seem like the best option for everyone," Tony's voice said through the phone speaker. "Military people can be stubborn about financial matters, so we'll need to present this as a family emergency that requires immediate attention." "What if Sue refuses to help?" Jessica's voice asked on the recording. "Well, that's where your legal authority becomes important," Tony replied smoothly. "According to the power of attorney documents you signed, you have the right to access her military accounts to satisfy the family debt obligations. But obviously it would be much easier if she cooperates voluntarily." "Is that legal?" Jessica asked. "Jessica, everything we're doing is completely legitimate," Tony said in a tone that was both reassuring and threatening. "Your father borrowed money, agreed to specific terms, and now the debt needs to be repaid. The fact that your family has additional resources just makes the resolution process more straightforward." The recording continued for several more minutes, revealing that Tony Vega had coached Jessica on exactly what to say and how to present the situation to make me feel responsible for solving Dad's problem. I looked up at Jessica, who was crying openly now. "Jessica, do you understand what you've done? You've given criminals legal authority to steal my military benefits and savings." "I thought I was helping," she sobbed. "I thought I was protecting Dad from going to jail." Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, having heard the crying and raised voices. "Mom, what's happening? Why is Aunt Jessica crying?" I walked over to Emma and put my arms around her shoulders. "Sweetheart, we're dealing with some complicated financial problems that your grandfather got involved in. Some people have been taking advantage of our family while I was deployed." "Are we in danger?" Emma asked, her voice small and scared. I looked around the kitchen at the evidence of months of manipulation and fraud spread across the table, then at my family's terrified faces. Tomorrow afternoon, Tony Vega and his associates would be coming to our house expecting to finalize their scheme to steal my military benefits and trap my family in permanent debt. "Emma, we're gonna be fine," I said, making a promise I intended to keep no matter what it took. "But I need you to trust me and do exactly what I say for the next few days, okay?" She nodded, and I realized that my real deployment was just beginning. I had spent 8 months protecting strangers overseas, and now I needed to use every skill I had learned to protect my own family from people who had been systematically destroying military families while their soldiers were deployed and helpless to fight back. The war was coming home, and I was ready to fight it. The next morning, I woke up before dawn and spent 2 hours researching VT Financial Services online. What I found confirmed my worst fears. They weren't listed with any legitimate business bureaus, had no physical office address, and their website had been created less than 2 years ago. But more disturbing were the scattered forum posts I found from other military families describing similar experiences with debt manipulation and threats. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a black SUV pulled into my parents' driveway. Through the living room window, I watched 3 men in expensive suits get out of the vehicle. The driver was tall and lean with graying hair, while the other 2 were younger and built like bodybuilders stuffed into business attire. Tony Vega knocked on the front door with the confidence of someone who expected to be welcomed. I opened it myself, keeping my expression neutral while studying his face. He was probably in his 50s with calculating eyes and a smile that never reached them. "Sue Patterson," he said, extending his hand for a handshake. "Tony Vega, it's wonderful to finally meet you in person." I shook his hand briefly, noting the expensive watch on his wrist and the way his associates positioned themselves to have clear views of both the front yard and the interior of the house. "Mr. Vega, please come in." They followed me into the living room where my parents sat stiffly on the couch, with Jessica perched nervously in the armchair. Emma was upstairs in her room following my instructions to stay out of sight during the meeting. Tony settled into my father's recliner without being invited, spreading several manila folders across the coffee table with practiced efficiency. His associates remained standing near the front door, their hands clasped behind their backs like security guards. "Sue, I appreciate your willingness to meet with us today." Tony began opening the first folder. "Family financial situations can be delicate, but I'm confident we can find a solution that works for everyone involved." "I'm listening," I said, sitting down across from him. Tony pulled out a thick document and turned it toward me. "Your father's current debt balance is $42,000, including accumulated interest and administrative fees. Under normal circumstances, this would require monthly payments of $3,800 for the next 18 months. I glanced at my father, whose face had gone pale at the mention of $3,800 monthly payments. "That's not what the original loan agreement specified." "Well, circumstances have changed," Tony said smoothly. "When borrowers miss payments, the terms automatically adjust to reflect the increased risk. It's all spelled out in the contract your father signed." He pulled out another document. "However, we're prepared to offer your family a much more manageable arrangement. If you agree to consolidate the debt using your military benefits as primary collateral, we can reduce the monthly payment to $1,200 over 5 years. $1,200 monthly for 5 years. I repeated, doing the math in my head. "That's $72,000 total for a debt that started at $25,000. Plus administrative costs and insurance fees," Tony added casually. "But the payment schedule would be much easier for your family to manage, and it protects your father from any legal complications." One of his associates stepped forward slightly. "Mr. Vega, should I explain the alternative arrangements?" Tony held up a hand. "Let's give Sue a chance to consider the primary option first." He turned back to me with that cold smile. "Sue, I want to be clear about something. Your family's debt situation affects everyone, but it especially affects Emma's future opportunities." The casual mention of my daughter's name sent ice through my veins, but I kept my expression unchanged. "How so?" "Well, young people today face so many challenges," Tony said, his voice taking on a concerned tone that felt like a threat wrapped in false sympathy. "College applications, part-time jobs, driving to and from school. There are so many things that can go wrong when families are under financial stress." "Are you threatening my daughter?" I asked quietly. Tony looked genuinely shocked. "Sue, I would never threaten anyone, especially a child. I'm simply pointing out that unresolved family debt creates stress that affects everyone involved. Emma seems like a bright, responsible young woman. It would be unfortunate if family financial problems interfered with her college plans or her sense of security." He opened another folder and showed me photographs of Emma leaving her high school, walking through the parking lot of Brewster's Coffee, where she worked, and getting into her car outside our house. The photos were taken from different angles and clearly showed that she had been under surveillance for weeks. "We believe in staying informed about the families we work with," Tony explained. "It helps us understand the full scope of everyone's needs and responsibilities." My father spoke up from the couch, his voice shaky with fear. "Sue, maybe we should just accept their payment plan. It would give us time to figure things out." "Dad, quiet," I said firmly, not taking my eyes off Tony. "Mr. Vega, let me make sure I understand your proposal. You want me to sign documents giving you access to my military benefits and savings to pay for debt that I didn't create, using payment terms that would cost our family nearly 3 times the original amount borrowed." "I prefer to think of it as a family investment in peace of mind," Tony replied. "Military families face unique challenges, and we specialize in providing financial stability during difficult transitions. And if I refuse—" Tony's smile faded slightly. "Sue, I hope you won't refuse. Refusal would force us to pursue other collection methods, which could be much more disruptive for everyone involved." He gestured to one of his associates who pulled out a tablet and showed me a legal document. "Your sister Jessica signed papers giving her power of attorney over family financial decisions. If you're unwilling to cooperate voluntarily, she has the legal authority to access your military accounts on behalf of resolving the family debt." I looked at Jessica, who was crying silently in the armchair. "Jessica, is that true?" "I didn't understand what I was signing," she whispered. "They told me it was just to help Dad with paperwork." Tony shrugged. "Legal documents are legal documents regardless of the signer's level of understanding. Jessica has the authority to act on your family's behalf, and we have documentation supporting our right to collect payment through whatever means necessary." "What kind of means?" I asked. "Well, military personnel have very specific financial obligations," Tony explained. "If your family defaults on legitimate debt, it could affect your security clearance, your deployment eligibility, even your career advancement opportunities. We certainly wouldn't want any of that to happen." I realized that Tony Vega had done his research on military regulations and was prepared to use my own career requirements against me. Military personnel could lose their security clearances for financial irresponsibility, and without a clearance, my medical training would be worthless in the military context. Additionally, Tony continued, Emma's college financial aid applications could be affected by family debt default. Students from families with unresolved financial obligations often find it difficult to qualify for federal education loans. "You've researched Emma's college applications?" I asked. "We believe in being thorough," Tony said. "Emma has applied to several excellent universities, and she's clearly worked hard to maintain good grades while managing her part-time job. It would be tragic if family financial problems prevented her from achieving her educational goals." I stood up slowly, using the movement to position myself between Tony and the staircase leading to Emma's room. "Mr. Vega, you seem to know a lot about my family, but there are some things you apparently haven't researched very thoroughly. Such as the fact that I'm not just a medic," I said quietly. "I'm a combat medic who has spent the last 8 months dealing with people who try to hurt innocent families, and I've gotten very good at identifying threats and neutralizing them." Tony's expression shifted slightly, and I saw him exchange a glance with his associates. "Sue, I think you're misunderstanding the nature of our business relationship. Am I? Because it sounds to me like you've been systematically targeting military families, manipulating their relatives into fraudulent agreements, and then using threats against children to extort money from deployed soldiers." "Those are very serious accusations," Tony said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "Yes, they are," I agreed, "and I have 48 hours to decide whether to pay your extortion demands or find another way to handle this situation." Tony closed his folders and stood up. Sue, I had hoped we could resolve this amicably. Your father borrowed money from legitimate lenders, and that debt needs to be repaid according to the terms he agreed to. Family cooperation makes this process much easier for everyone involved. And if my family doesn't cooperate, Tony's smile returned, but now it looked predatory rather than friendly. Then we'll be forced to pursue collection through the legal authorities your sister granted us. But I'm confident that once you've had time to consider Emma's best interests, you'll realize that cooperation is the smartest choice for everyone. He headed toward the front door, followed by his associates. We'll contact you in 48 hours for your decision, Sue. I hope your family chooses the path that protects everyone's future. After they left, the house felt suffocatingly quiet. My parents sat on the couch looking traumatized, while Jessica continued crying in the armchair. Emma came downstairs cautiously, having heard the front door close. "Mom, who were those men?" she asked. I looked at my 17-year-old daughter, thinking about the photos Tony had shown me and the threats he had made about her future. Emma deserved to know the truth about what was happening, but she also deserved to feel safe in her own home. Emma, those men represent people who have been taking advantage of our family's financial situation, I said carefully, but I want you to know that I'm not going to let them hurt you or interfere with your college plans. Are they dangerous? She asked. I thought about Tony Vega's calculating eyes, his detailed surveillance of our family, and his willingness to threaten a teenager to collect money. Yes, sweetheart, I think they are dangerous. But dangerous people can be stopped if you know how to fight them properly. Emma looked at me with the same trust she had shown as a little girl when I promised to protect her from monsters under her bed. The difference was that this time, the monsters were real, and they had been planning to destroy our family for months. But they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that a deployed military medic would be too isolated and overwhelmed to fight back effectively. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, I sat in my old bedroom with my laptop and started building a case against Tony Vega's operation. My military training had taught me that the best defense against a well-organized enemy was intelligence gathering, followed by a strategic counterattack using resources they didn't know you had. I started by downloading and printing every document Tony had shown us, along with all the papers Jessica had signed and every communication from VT Financial Services. Then I began researching federal laws regarding crimes against military personnel and their families. What I discovered was both encouraging and horrifying. There were specific federal statutes designed to protect deployed military personnel from financial exploitation, but they were rarely enforced because most victims didn't know they existed or were too intimidated to report the crimes. At 2 a.m, I found what I was looking for. The Service Members Civil Relief Act included provisions making it a federal crime to target deployed military personnel's families with predatory lending schemes, especially when those schemes involved fraudulent documentation or threats against family members. I also found contact information for the Military Legal Assistance Office at my home base, which provided legal services to military personnel dealing with civilian legal problems. More importantly, I discovered that the FBI had a specialized unit that investigated financial crimes, specifically targeting military families. By dawn, I had compiled a comprehensive file documenting Tony Vega's operation. The evidence included Jessica's forged power of attorney documents, copies of the predatory loan agreements, photos of our house and Emma, and recordings of Tony's threats from our meeting. But I needed more evidence to build a case strong enough to shut down their entire operation. I suspected that our family wasn't the only one being targeted, and if I could find other victims, we might be able to build a federal case against the entire network. I called the Military Legal Assistance Office as soon as they opened and explained our situation to Captain Amanda Rodriguez, a JAG officer who specialized in civilian financial crimes against military families. Sergeant Patterson, what you're describing sounds like a sophisticated operation that's specifically targeting deployed military personnel, Captain Rodriguez said. These criminals know that soldiers overseas have limited ability to monitor their families' financial situations, making them perfect targets for this kind of exploitation. Captain, is there any way to trace other families who might be going through similar situations? I asked. Actually, yes. We've been tracking reports of predatory lending schemes targeting military families across several states. If your case involves the same network we've been investigating, your evidence could be crucial for building a federal prosecution. Captain Rodriguez connected me with FBI Special Agent Rachel Porter, who worked with a joint task force investigating financial crimes against military personnel. Agent Porter asked me to bring all our documentation to the FBI field office that afternoon. Sergeant Patterson, I want you to understand that if you decide to cooperate with our investigation, you and your family will be taking some personal risks, Agent Porter explained during our phone conversation. These criminal organizations can be dangerous when they realize they're under federal investigation. Agent Porter, they're already threatening my family, I replied. The only question is whether we fight back or let them destroy us. In that case, I think we can help each other. That afternoon, I drove to the FBI field office with a box full of evidence documenting Tony Vega's operation. Agent Porter was a woman in her 40s with graying hair and intelligent eyes that reminded me of some of the senior military officers I had worked with overseas. Sergeant Patterson, this documentation is exactly what we've been looking for, Agent Porter said after reviewing our files. VT Financial Services is part of a larger criminal network that has been systematically targeting military families across 7 states. She showed me a map with red pins marking locations where similar schemes had been reported. They specifically target families with deployed soldiers using the deployment separation to manipulate vulnerable family members into fraudulent debt agreements. How many families are we talking about? I asked. At least 47 that we know of, but we suspect there are many more who haven't reported the crimes because they're too embarrassed or intimidated. Agent Porter explained that the criminal network had stolen over $2 million from military families, using variations of the same scheme Tony had tried with our family. They targeted soldiers' relatives with gambling addiction, financial emergencies, or other vulnerabilities, then used fraudulent documentation to claim legal authority over the soldiers' military benefits. The genius of their scheme is that they make the families feel responsible for the debt while making the soldiers feel responsible for protecting their families, Agent Porter said. Most victims end up paying rather than risk having their children threatened or their military careers destroyed. But not all of them. No, not all of them. We have 3 families who fought back and provided evidence, but we need more documentation to build a case strong enough to shut down the entire network. Your sister's power of attorney documents and the recordings of Tony's threats could provide the missing pieces we need. Agent Porter outlined a plan that would allow me to gather additional evidence while protecting my family from retaliation. If you're willing to work with us, we can set up a controlled operation that lets Tony Vega think he's successfully collecting money, while actually documenting his crimes for federal prosecution. What would that involve? You would agree to meet with Tony again, but this time you'd be wearing recording equipment and following a script designed to get him to admit details about his operation. We'd have agents positioned nearby for your protection, and we'd coordinate with your military command to ensure your security clearance isn't affected by the investigation. I thought about Emma's frightened expression when she asked if we were in danger and about the other military families who were probably going through the same terror we had experienced. Agent Porter, what are the chances of actually stopping these people? With your evidence and cooperation, I'd say we have an excellent chance of dismantling their entire operation and recovering money for the families they victimized. That evening, I sat down with Emma and explained what was happening. She deserved to know that her mother was about to take on a criminal organization, and she deserved the chance to help protect other families from what we had experienced. "Mom, are you going to be okay?" she asked after I finished explaining the FBI plan. "Emma," I've spent 8 months protecting other people's families overseas. Now I get to protect our family and other military families right here at home. This is what I trained for. Can I help? I looked at my 17-year-old daughter who had been working at a coffee shop to save money for college, while criminals stole her education fund, and I realized that she had inherited more than just my stubborn streak. Actually, Emma, there is something you can do to help, but it's going to require you to be very brave and very careful. What is it? Agent Porter thinks there might be other teenagers in our area whose families are being targeted by the same criminals. If you could carefully ask around at school and work, you might be able to identify other families who need help. Emma straightened up with the same determination I had seen in young soldiers who were ready to serve something bigger than themselves. "Mom, I'll find them." As I watched Emma begin planning her own investigation, I realized that Tony Vega's operation had made a fatal mistake. They had assumed that military families would be isolated and helpless when their soldiers were deployed. But they had forgotten that military families are part of a community that protects its own, and they had just awakened a community that was ready to fight back. The next morning, Agent Porter called with disturbing news that changed everything I thought I knew about our situation. "Sergeant Patterson, we've been analyzing the timeline of your family's contact with VT Financial Services, and we've discovered something that might be difficult to hear." "What did you find?" "Your sister Jessica didn't just become involved after your father missed loan payments. According to phone records and financial documents we've obtained through court orders, Jessica contacted Tony Vega's operation 8 months ago, shortly after you deployed." I felt the floor shift beneath me. "What do you mean she contacted them?" Jessica was facing her own financial crisis when her husband lost his job. She researched predatory lending services online and specifically sought out companies that worked with military families. She contacted VT Financial Services and told them about your deployment and your father's gambling tendencies. I sat down heavily in the kitchen chair, staring at the phone in disbelief. "Are you telling me that Jessica initiated this whole situation?" "I'm afraid so. Jessica essentially delivered your family to Tony Vega's operation on a silver platter. She provided them with detailed information about your military pay, your deployment schedule, your father's vulnerabilities, and Emma's college needs." Agent Porter explained that Jessica had originally planned to borrow money herself, using my deployment pay as collateral without my knowledge. But when Tony's people realized how much more profitable it would be to target my entire family, they developed the gambling addiction scheme to draw in my father and create a larger debt obligation. "Agent Porter, are you saying that my father's gambling problem was artificially created?" "Partially, yes. VT Financial Services works with corrupt online gambling operations that use rigged algorithms to create rapid addiction and massive debt. They specifically target relatives of deployed military personnel because they know those families are emotionally vulnerable and financially desperate." I thought about my father's sudden descent into gambling over the past year and how it had coincided perfectly with Jessica's husband losing his job and my deployment overseas. How long has this been planned? According to the evidence we've gathered, Tony Vega's people have been building a profile of your family for nearly a year. Jessica provided them with your social media information, your military records, Emma's school and work schedules, even details about your parents' health and financial situation. "Why would Jessica do this to our family?" Agent Porter's voice was gentle but firm. "Sergeant Patterson, people in desperate financial situations often make choices that seem unthinkable under normal circumstances. Jessica was facing bankruptcy, potential loss of her house, and her children's private school tuition. Tony Vega's people are experts at exploiting that kind of desperation." I hung up the phone and sat in the kitchen trying to process what I had just learned. My sister hadn't been manipulated into betraying our family. She had actively planned to steal my deployment money and had accidentally exposed all of us to a criminal network that specialized in destroying military families. When Jessica arrived for our planned family meeting that afternoon, I was waiting for her with Agent Porter's evidence spread across the kitchen table. "Jessica, sit down," I said quietly. "We need to talk about when you first contacted VT Financial Services." Jessica's face went white as she saw the phone records and financial documents. "Sue, I can explain." "I'm listening." Jessica slumped into the chair across from me, her hands shaking. "Brad lost his job 8 months ago, right after you deployed. We were going to lose our house and the kids were going to have to change schools. I was desperate. So you decided to steal my deployment money." "I wasn't going to steal it," Jessica protested weakly. "I was going to borrow it and pay it back before you came home. I researched companies that worked with military families, thinking they would understand the situation better." "And you found Tony Vega's operation." Jessica nodded miserably. "When I called them, they seemed so professional and understanding. They said they worked with military families all the time and that they had special programs for emergency situations." "What information did you give them, Jessica?" "Everything," she whispered. "They said they needed a complete family financial profile to determine the best loan structure. I told them about your deployment pay Dad's retirement income, Emma's college fund, even Mom's Social Security." I felt sick as I realized how completely Jessica had exposed our family. "You gave criminals a blueprint for destroying us." "I thought they were legitimate business people," Jessica said desperately. "But when I met with them the first time, they said they had a better idea. Instead of me borrowing money directly, they suggested creating a family loan that would involve Dad as the primary borrower." "Why would that be better?" "They said it would be easier to structure the payments around Dad's retirement income, and if anything went wrong, it would protect you from having military financial problems that could affect your career." I stared at Jessica as the full scope of her betrayal became clear. "So you helped them target Dad specifically because you thought it would protect me from consequences." "I was trying to help everyone," Jessica said, crying openly now. "I thought I could solve our financial problems without hurting anyone else." "Jessica, you fed our father to loan sharks and put Emma in danger because you were too proud to ask for help." "I was going to tell you when you came home," she said weakly. "Tell me that you had sold our family to criminals." Jessica looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "Sue, I never meant for it to go this far. When Dad started gambling, I tried to get Tony to cancel the whole arrangement, but he said Dad had signed binding contracts and there was nothing he could do. So you signed power of attorney documents giving yourself legal authority to access my military benefits. Tony said it was the only way to protect you from Dad's debt," Jessica explained. "He said if Dad defaulted, it could affect your security clearance and your military career. The power of attorney was supposed to protect you by giving me the authority to handle the family financial situation without involving your military command." I realized that Jessica had been manipulated just as much as she had manipulated others, but her original decision to betray our family had created the opportunity for everything that followed. "Jessica, do you understand what you've done to Emma? She's been working at a coffee shop to save money for community college because you helped criminals steal her education fund." "I thought I could fix it before anyone found out," Jessica said hopelessly. "And now we're all targets of a criminal organization that has been planning to exploit us for months." Jessica looked around the kitchen at the evidence of the investigation she had inadvertently triggered. "Sue, what's going to happen to me?" I thought about Agent Porter's explanation of Jessica's legal situation and the choice she would have to make. "Jessica, you have 2 options. You can cooperate with the FBI investigation and help us shut down Tony Vega's operation, or you can face federal charges for conspiracy to defraud military personnel." "What does cooperation involve?" "It involves telling the truth about everything you did, providing evidence to help prosecute the people who have been targeting military families, and accepting responsibility for your role in creating this situation." Jessica was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her processing the full reality of what her desperation had cost our family. "Sue, if I cooperate with the FBI, will Emma be safe? Jessica, Emma will be safe because we're going to stop these people from hurting any more families. But that's going to happen with or without your help. I stood up and gathered the evidence from the kitchen table. Jessica, I need you to understand something. I'm not asking you to cooperate with this investigation for my sake or for Dad's sake. I'm asking you to cooperate for Emma's sake and for the sake of all the other military children who are being threatened by the people you brought into our lives. Jessica nodded slowly. What do I need to do? You need to call Agent Porter and tell her you're ready to provide complete testimony about your role in this operation. And Jessica, if you hold back anything or try to minimize what you did, I will make sure you face the full legal consequences for what you've put our family through. As Jessica reached for her phone to call Agent Porter, I realized that our family's healing would have to begin with complete honesty about how we had been broken in the first place. Agent Porter arrived at our house 2 hours after Jessica called, accompanied by another FBI agent and a federal prosecutor who specialized in military family exploitation cases. The kitchen table became command central for building a federal case that would protect our family and dozens of others across multiple states. Jessica, I need you to understand that your cooperation in this investigation is voluntary, but it's also your best chance to avoid serious federal charges. Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Chen explained. The crimes you've described involve conspiracy to defraud military personnel, which carries significant prison time. Jessica nodded nervously. I'll tell you everything I know. Over the next 3 hours, Jessica provided detailed testimony about her initial contact with Tony Vega's operation and her role in setting up our family for exploitation. Agent Porter recorded everything while taking notes for the broader investigation. Jessica, you mentioned that Tony Vega's people suggested targeting your father instead of arranging a direct loan for you, Agent Porter said. Do you remember exactly how they explained that decision? They said that military family loans were complicated because of federal regulations protecting deployed soldiers, Jessica answered. But if they structured the loan around Dad's gambling problem, they could avoid those regulations and create better payment terms. Did they explain how they planned to create gambling debt for your father? Attorney Chen asked. Tony said they worked with online gambling companies that offered special promotion programs for new customers, Jessica replied. He said Dad would get bonus credits and special offers that would encourage him to play more frequently. I felt my stomach turn as I realized how deliberately my father had been targeted and manipulated. Jessica, did you know these gambling sites were rigged? I didn't know they were rigged, but Tony did explain that their partner companies were designed to create customer engagement, which I now realize meant addiction and debt. Agent Porter showed Jessica printouts of email communications between VT Financial Services and several online gambling operations. Jessica, do you recognize any of these gambling websites as places your father was playing? Jessica pointed to 3 different sites. Dad was using Lucky Stars Casino, Golden Eagle Gaming, and Imperial Slots. He said they kept sending him special offers and bonus opportunities. These are all illegal gambling operations run by the same criminal network as VT Financial Services, Attorney Chen explained. Your father was never gambling on legitimate sites. He was being systematically robbed by people who knew exactly how much money he had access to and how much debt they could create. Agent Porter pulled out a thick file folder. Sergeant Patterson, based on Jessica's testimony and our ongoing investigation, we've identified 43 other military families who've been targeted by this same network across 7 states. How much money are we talking about? I asked. Over $2.3 million in documented theft, but we suspect the actual amount is much higher because many families haven't reported the crimes. Attorney Chen opened his laptop and showed us a map of the United States with red dots marking locations where military families had been victimized. The pattern is always the same. They identify deployed military personnel, research their family members for vulnerabilities, then create debt situations that allow them to access military benefits and savings. What makes this case special is that Jessica's documentation provides direct evidence of their targeting methodology, Agent Porter explained. Most other families only have evidence of the end result, not the planning and setup phase. I studied the map and realized that Emma and I were part of something much larger than a simple loan shark operation. Agent Porter, what's the next step in the investigation? We need to gather additional evidence by documenting their collection methods and threats. If you're willing, we'd like you to participate in a controlled operation where you meet with Tony Vega while wearing recording equipment. What kind of recording equipment? Agent Porter opened a small metal case and showed me devices that looked like jewelry and clothing accessories. These are professional-grade recording devices that are virtually undetectable. You would wear them during your meeting with Tony following a script designed to get him to reveal details about his operation. Is it dangerous? There are always risks when dealing with criminal organizations, Attorney Chen admitted. But we'll have agents positioned nearby, and we've done this type of operation successfully many times before. Jessica spoke up. Sue, what if I'm the one who meets with Tony? He trusts me more, and he might be more likely to reveal information if he thinks I'm still cooperating with him. Agent Porter and Attorney Chen exchanged glances. Jessica, that's actually not a bad idea, Agent Porter said. You could arrange a meeting under the pretense of finalizing the payment arrangements, then use that opportunity to gather evidence about other families they're targeting. Would that be safer for our family? I asked. Potentially, yes, Attorney Chen replied. If Jessica can document their broader operation, we might be able to make arrests before they realize they're under investigation. I thought about the risks of letting Jessica handle the evidence gathering after everything she had already done to endanger our family, but I also realized that she might be our best chance to protect Emma and other military children from ongoing threats. Jessica, if you do this, you follow Agent Porter's instructions exactly. No improvisation, no attempts to negotiate on your own, no protecting anyone except the investigation. I understand, Jessica said. Sue, I want to fix what I broke. Agent Porter outlined the plan. Jessica would contact Tony Vega and arrange a meeting to discuss finalizing the payment arrangements for our family's debt. During that meeting, she would be wearing recording equipment and following a specific script designed to get Tony to reveal information about other military families and the broader scope of his operation. Jessica, the key is to get him talking about his other clients and his methods for targeting military families, Agent Porter explained. We need him to admit that he specifically targets deployed soldiers and that he works with gambling operations to create artificial debt. What if he suspects something? Jessica asked. If Tony becomes suspicious, you end the meeting immediately and contact us, Attorney Chen said. Your safety is more important than gathering evidence. That evening, after the FBI agents left, I sat down with Emma to explain what was going to happen next. Mom, is Aunt Jessica going to be okay? Emma asked. I think so, sweetheart. Jessica made some terrible choices that hurt our family, but now she's trying to help protect other families from the same thing. Are we going to be okay? I looked at my 17-year-old daughter, who had been through more in the past week than most people experience in years, and I realized that she was stronger than I had given her credit for. Emma, we're going to be better than okay. We're going to stop these people from hurting other military families, and we're going to make sure you get to go to the college you want without worrying about money. How can you be sure? Because I've learned something important this week. Our family is stronger than I thought, even when we're broken. And when we work together to protect other people, we become even stronger. As Emma went upstairs to finish her homework, I realized that Tony Vega's operation had made a critical miscalculation. They had assumed that breaking our family would make us easier to control. Instead, they had just given us a reason to fight back together. 3 days later, Jessica sat in the parking lot of Brewster's Coffee, the same place where Emma worked part-time, waiting for Tony Vega to arrive for their arranged meeting. She wore a small recording device disguised as a pendant necklace, and Agent Porter was positioned in an unmarked vehicle with a clear view of the coffee shop entrance. I waited at home with Emma, monitoring the operation through a secure phone connection with Agent Porter. My hands were clenched into fists as I listened to Jessica's nervous breathing through the communication system. Target vehicle approaching. Agent Porter's voice crackled through the speaker. Black SUV, 3 occupants. Through Jessica's hidden microphone, we could hear her ordering a coffee and finding a table in the back corner of the coffee shop, following Agent Porter's instructions to choose a location with good acoustics for recording. Tony Vega entered the coffee shop exactly on time, accompanied by one of his associates from our previous meeting. He wore the same expensive suit and confident expression, clearly expecting Jessica to provide him with good news about our family's willingness to cooperate. "Jessica, you look well," Tony said, sitting down across from her. "I hope you have positive news about Sue's decision regarding the payment arrangements." "Sue is considering the options you presented," Jessica replied, following the script Agent Porter had provided. "But she has some questions about the specifics of your operation." "What kind of questions?" "She wants to know how many other military families you work with," Jessica said. "Sue is concerned about whether your company has experience handling complex military benefit situations." Tony smiled proudly. "Jessica VT Financial Services specializes in military family financial solutions. We work with dozens of families across multiple states, all with situations similar to yours." "What makes military families different from regular clients?" Jessica asked, encouraging him to explain his targeting methodology. "Military families face unique challenges," Tony explained. "Deployment separations create financial stress and communication difficulties that civilians don't understand. We've developed specialized approaches that account for military pay structures, deployment schedules, and family dynamics." Through the recording equipment, we could hear Tony becoming more animated as he described his operation with obvious pride. "For example, we work with online entertainment companies that offer special programs for military family members who need stress relief during deployment separations." "You mean gambling websites?" Jessica asked. "Entertainment platforms that include gaming options," Tony corrected smoothly. "These platforms are designed to provide emotional support and financial opportunities for family members dealing with deployment stress." I felt sick listening to Tony describe gambling addiction as emotional support for military families. Agent Porter's voice came through our communication system. He's admitting to deliberately targeting military families with gambling addiction schemes. Tony continued explaining his operation with growing confidence. "The beauty of our system is that we can help families access their military benefits more efficiently while providing ongoing financial support during deployment periods." "How do you identify families who need these services?" Jessica asked. "We have partnerships with various organizations that help us identify military families facing financial challenges," Tony explained. "Sometimes family members contact us directly, like you did, Jessica. Other times, we receive referrals from our business partners who work with military communities." "What kind of business partners?" Tony leaned forward conspiratorially. "We work with bankruptcy attorneys, debt consolidation services, even some financial advisors on military bases. They help us identify families who could benefit from our specialized military family loan programs." Agent Porter's voice crackled through our speaker. "He's describing a systematic targeting network." "Jessica, I want you to understand that Sue's situation is not unique," Tony continued. "We're currently working with 47 military families across 7 states, all with similar circumstances. Deployed soldiers, family, financial stress children facing college expenses. We've helped all of them access their military benefits more effectively." 47 families, Jessica repeated for the recording. "Actually, 52 as of this week," Tony corrected. "Military families trust us because we understand their unique needs and challenges." Jessica followed Agent Porter's script perfectly. "Tony Sue wants to understand exactly how the payment process works with military benefits." "It's quite simple," Tony explained. "Once we have proper legal authority, we can work directly with military pay centers to arrange automatic deductions. The soldier never has to worry about missed payments or administrative complications. Legal authority. Power of attorney documents like the ones you signed, Jessica. They give us the authority to represent family interests with military financial offices. Through the recording, we could hear Tony's associate speaking quietly to him about something. Tony nodded and turned back to Jessica. "Jessica, I need to share something important with you," Tony said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "We've been monitoring some unusual activity related to military family financial investigations. It's possible that some of our clients have been contacted by federal investigators asking questions about our services." "What kind of investigators?" Jessica asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "FBI agents claiming to investigate financial crimes against military families," Tony replied. "These investigators have been spreading false information about legitimate business practices in the military family financial services sector." I felt my heart pounding as I realized Tony was warning Jessica about the investigation she was secretly participating in. "What should families do if investigators contact them?" Jessica asked. "The most important thing is not to provide any information without consulting with us first," Tony explained. "These investigators often misrepresent normal business practices as criminal activity. They try to frighten military families into providing false testimony about companies that have legitimately helped them access their benefits." Agent Porter's voice came through our speaker. "He's coaching witnesses to obstruct federal investigations." Tony continued his warning. "Jessica, if any investigators contact your family, you need to call me immediately. We have attorneys who specialize in protecting military families from false federal charges." False charges. The federal government sometimes tries to prosecute legitimate financial service providers who work with military families, Tony said. They claim that helping families access their own military benefits is some kind of fraud or exploitation. Through the recording equipment, we could hear Tony's phone ringing. He answered it and had a brief whispered conversation that Jessica couldn't hear clearly. After hanging up, Tony's demeanor changed completely. His friendly professional tone disappeared, replaced by something cold and threatening. "Jessica, I just received some disturbing information," he said quietly. "It appears that your family may have been in contact with federal investigators." "I don't know what you mean," Jessica replied, but I could hear the fear in her voice. "Jessica lying to me would be a serious mistake," Tony said. "My business partners have very sophisticated ways of monitoring potential threats to our operations." Agent Porter's voice crackled urgently through our speaker. "Abort! Jessica needs to leave immediately." But before Jessica could respond, Tony's associate stood up and moved to block her path to the coffee shop exit. "Jessica, I think we need to have a more detailed conversation about your family's situation," Tony said. "Perhaps somewhere more private than this coffee shop." Through the recording equipment, we could hear Jessica's breathing becoming rapid and panicked. The sting operation that was supposed to gather evidence against Tony Vega had just become a potential kidnapping situation. And Emma and I were listening to it happen in real time, helpless to protect the sister who had betrayed us, but was now risking her life to help us fight back. Agent Porter's voice exploded through our communication system. "All units move, now subject is attempting to detain our witness." Through Jessica's recording device, we could hear the chaos erupting in the coffee shop as FBI agents stormed through the entrance. Tony Vega's voice cut through the noise, shouting orders to his associate, while chairs scraped across the floor and other customers screamed in confusion. "Federal agents, nobody move." Agent Porter's commanding voice boomed through the recording. "Anthony Vega, you're under arrest for conspiracy to defraud military personnel." I gripped Emma's hand as we listened to the takedown happening in real time. The recording captured Tony's furious protests and his associate's attempt to escape through the coffee shop's back exit, followed by the sounds of additional agents intercepting him in the parking lot. "Jessica, are you injured?" Agent Porter's voice asked clearly. "I'm okay," Jessica replied, though her voice was shaking. "I'm okay." 20 minutes later, Agent Porter called us directly. Sergeant Patterson, your sister is safe and unharmed. We have Tony Vega and his associate in custody, and we've seized his phone and laptop containing evidence of his broader operation. What did you find? I asked. More than we hoped for. Tony's phone contains contact information for 57 military families across 8 states, along with detailed profiles of their financial situations, deployment schedules, and family vulnerabilities. Agent Porter explained that Tony's laptop revealed the full scope of the criminal network. VT Financial Services was connected to 12 different online gambling operations, 6 bankruptcy law firms, and at least 20 military-base financial advisors who were secretly feeding information to the criminal organization. Sergeant Patterson, your case has helped us identify a systematic operation that has been targeting military families for over 3 years. Attorney Chen said when he arrived at our house an hour later. The evidence we gathered today will allow us to make arrests across multiple states and recover money for dozens of families. Emma sat beside me on the couch, listening intently as Attorney Chen spread out documents showing the connections between various criminal organizations that had been working together to exploit military families. How much money did they steal total? Emma asked. Based on the records we've seized, over $4.2 million from military families nationwide, Attorney Chen replied, but the psychological damage is probably worth much more than that. Agent Porter arrived with Jessica, who looked exhausted but relieved. Sue, I got him to admit everything, Jessica said as she sat down in the armchair. Tony described the whole operation, including how they specifically target deployed soldiers' families. Jessica, you did exactly what we needed you to do, Agent Porter said. Tony's recorded admissions will be crucial evidence in prosecuting the entire network. Attorney Chen opened his laptop and showed us a map displaying the locations of all the military families that had been targeted by Tony's organization. Red dots covered states from California to North Carolina, with clusters around major military bases. Each red dot represents a military family that has been systematically victimized, Attorney Chen explained. Thanks to the evidence your family provided, we can now contact all of these families and help them recover their stolen money. What happens to the families who are still trapped in debt to these people? I asked. All fraudulent debt agreements will be declared invalid, Attorney Chen said. Any money paid to VT Financial Services will be returned to the families, plus interest and additional compensation for damages. Agent Porter pulled out a thick folder of documents. Sergeant Patterson, we've also identified something else that might interest you. Tony's organization wasn't just stealing money from military families, they were selling detailed personal information about deployed soldiers to other criminal networks. What kind of information? I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. Deployment locations, return dates, family contact information, even details about soldiers' military specialties and security clearance levels, Agent Porter explained. This information was being sold to identity theft networks and other criminal organizations that prey on military personnel. Emma looked up from the documents she was reading. Mom, this means Emma's friend Sarah's family might be involved too, right? What do you mean, Emma? Agent Porter asked. Sarah's dad is deployed with the Army and her family has been acting really strange lately, Emma explained. Her mom started working 2 jobs even though she said they were doing fine financially, and Sarah had to quit the debate team because they couldn't afford the travel expenses. I felt my heart sink as I realized Emma had identified another victim family right in our own community. Agent Porter, how do we check whether Sarah's family is being targeted? We can cross-reference the family name with Tony's contact database, Agent Porter said, opening her laptop. What's Sarah's last name? Morrison, Emma replied. Her dad is Staff Sergeant David Morrison. Agent Porter typed quickly and then turned her laptop screen toward us. Morrison, David, and Patricia, 2 children, Sarah, age 17, and Michael, age 14, targeted 8 months ago through gambling debt manipulation. They're on the list, I said quietly. Emma stood up abruptly. Mom, we have to help them. Sarah's been working at the grocery store every day after school, and her mom looks exhausted all the time. Emma, how many other military families at your school have been acting differently lately? Agent Porter asked. Emma thought for a moment. At least 3 others that I can think of. Jake Chen's family moved out of their house and into an apartment. Maria Rodriguez's mom started selling jewelry online, and Tyler Washington's family canceled their vacation and sold their second car. Agent Porter and Attorney Chen exchanged significant glances. Emma, would you be willing to help us identify other affected families in your community? Attorney Chen asked. What would that involve? I asked, my protective instincts kicking in. Nothing dangerous, Agent Porter assured me. Emma could provide us with names of military families that seem to be experiencing sudden financial difficulties. We can then check those names against Tony's database and contact the families directly. Emma nodded eagerly. I want to help. These people hurt my friends' families just like they hurt ours. Over the next 2 hours, Emma helped Agent Porter identify 7 additional military families in our area who appeared on Tony's target list. Each family had a deployed parent and had experienced sudden financial difficulties that coincided with the timeline of Tony's operation. Agent Porter, what's the next step for prosecuting these people? I asked. We'll be making arrests across multiple states over the next week, Attorney Chen explained. The evidence your family provided allows us to charge Tony Vega and his associates with federal crimes that carry significant prison time. How significant? Tony Vega is looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison for conspiracy to defraud military personnel, money laundering, and racketeering, Attorney Chen said. His associates will face similar charges based on their level of involvement. Jessica spoke up from the armchair where she had been quietly listening. What about me? What charges am I facing? Attorney Chen reviewed Jessica's file. Based on your cooperation with the investigation and your testimony, we're recommending a plea agreement that involves community service and financial restitution rather than prison time. What kind of community service? Jessica asked. You'll work with military family support organizations to help other families recognize and avoid predatory lending schemes. Agent Porter explained, your experience will help protect other military families from the kind of manipulation you experienced. I looked at Jessica and realized that despite her terrible choices, she was genuinely committed to making amends for the damage she had caused. Jessica, there's something I need you to understand, I said. Your cooperation with this investigation doesn't automatically fix our family relationships. You're going to have to earn back trust through your actions, not just your words. I understand, Jessica replied. Sue, I know I broke our family, but I want to spend whatever time it takes helping other families avoid what we went through. Emma stood up and walked over to Jessica's chair. Aunt Jessica, I'm still angry about what you did, but I'm proud of you for helping catch these people. As I watched Emma hug her aunt, I realized that our family's healing was going to be a long process that would require forgiveness, accountability, and a shared commitment to protecting other military families from exploitation. But for the first time since coming home from deployment, I felt hope that we could rebuild our relationships on a foundation of truth rather than secrets and manipulation. 2 weeks later, I sat in the federal courthouse in downtown Portland, watching as Tony Vega and 4 of his associates were arraigned on charges that would keep them in prison for decades. The courtroom was packed with military families from across the region who had been victimized by their operation. U.S. District Judge Catherine Morrison read the charges with a gravity that reflected the scope of the criminal enterprise. Anthony Vega, you are charged with conspiracy to defraud military personnel, racketeering money, laundering identity theft, and operating an illegal gambling enterprise specifically targeting deployed service members and their families. Tony Vega, who had looked so confident and threatening in our living room just weeks before now, stood in an orange jumpsuit, with his hands shackled, looking pale and defeated as the weight of federal justice descended on him. Attorney Chen presented evidence that revealed the true scope of the criminal network. Your Honor, this defendant operated a systematic scheme that specifically targeted the families of deployed military personnel, exploiting the emotional vulnerability and financial stress created by military deployment separations. The judge reviewed the evidence files that Agent Porter and our family had helped compile. Mr. Vega, the court notes that your operation specifically researched military deployment schedules, family financial situations, and even the psychological profiles of military spouses and children to maximize the effectiveness of your criminal enterprise. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, the evidence shows that you deliberately created gambling addiction in victims through rigged online platforms, then used threats against military children to extort money from deployed soldiers who were serving their country overseas. I felt a deep satisfaction as I watched Tony Vega's expensive lawyers struggle to find any defense for their client's actions. The evidence was overwhelming, and the federal sentencing guidelines for crimes against military families were severe. During the sentencing phase, Judge Morrison addressed Tony directly. Mr. Vega targeting military families while their soldiers are deployed overseas represents a particularly heinous form of theft that strikes at the heart of our nation's military readiness and family security. Your operation stole over $4.2 million from families who were already sacrificing for their country's defense. You threatened children, manipulated vulnerable family members, and deliberately exploited the service and sacrifice of American military personnel. Tony Vega received a sentence of 18 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 5 years of supervised release. His associates received sentences ranging from 8 to 12 years, depending on their level of involvement in the operation. But the legal reckoning extended beyond just Tony's immediate organization. The FBI investigation had uncovered a network of corrupt financial advisors, bankruptcy attorneys, and online gambling operators who had been working together to target military families. Attorney Chen explained the broader prosecutions to our family during a meeting after the sentencing. Sergeant Patterson, your case has triggered the largest federal investigation of crimes against military families in recent history. How many people are being prosecuted? I asked. 37 defendants across 8 states, including financial advisors who were working on military bases. Attorney Chen replied. We've also shut down 12 illegal gambling websites and seized assets worth over $8 million. Jessica, who had been attending all the court proceedings as part of her cooperation agreement, spoke up. What happens to the money that was seized? All seized assets will be distributed to the military families who were victimized, Attorney Chen explained. Based on our calculations, most families will recover their full losses plus additional compensation for damages. Agent Porter opened a folder containing financial recovery documents. Sergeant Patterson, your family is entitled to receive $28,000 in recovered funds, plus an additional $15,000 in federal victim compensation. I looked at the recovery amount and realized it was more than enough to fully fund Emma's college education at her preferred university. Agent Porter, what about the other families in our community? Every family on Tony's target list will receive full financial recovery plus additional compensation, Agent Porter said. The Morrison family will receive $32,000, and the other families Emma identified will receive amounts ranging from $15,000 to $40,000 each. Emma, who had been quietly listening to the legal proceedings, suddenly spoke up. Agent Porter, can I ask you something? Of course, Emma. What happens to prevent this kind of thing from happening to other military families? Agent Porter smiled at Emma's question. That's actually something your mother can help answer. I looked at Agent Porter in confusion. What do you mean? Sergeant Patterson, based on your investigative work and your ability to identify criminal targeting of military families, the Department of Defense has requested that you consider a specialized assignment that would keep you stateside while working to protect military families from financial exploitation. What kind of assignment? Attorney Chen pulled out an official-looking document. The Pentagon is creating a new military family financial protection unit that would investigate and prevent crimes specifically targeting military personnel and their families. They want you to lead the training program for military investigators who would work with FBI agents like Agent Porter to identify and shut down operations like Tony Vega's. Agent Porter explained. I stared at the assignment offer, realizing that Tony Vega's attempt to destroy my family had inadvertently created an opportunity for me to protect thousands of other military families. Would this assignment keep me near Emma? I asked. The position is based here in Oregon with travel to military bases for training purposes, Attorney Chen said. You would be home every night and Emma could attend college locally while you develop programs to protect other military children. Emma grabbed my hand excitedly. Mom, you could protect other military families while staying home with me. I thought about the past month and everything our family had been through. Tony Vega had tried to break us by exploiting our separation and vulnerabilities, but instead, he had shown us that we were stronger together than we had ever imagined. Agent Porter, when do I start? Over the following weeks, I watched as our community of military families began healing from the systematic exploitation they had endured. The Morrison family was able to move back into their original house, and Sarah rejoined the debate team. Other families in our area used their financial recovery to pay for children's college expenses and rebuild their financial security. Jessica completed her community service by speaking to military spouse groups about recognizing predatory lending schemes, turning her experience with manipulation into education that would protect other families. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome was watching Emma develop into an advocate for military families who had been victimized by financial crimes. Emma started a support group at her high school for children from military families, providing peer counseling for teenagers whose families had been targeted by criminal organizations. Her work attracted attention from military family support organizations nationwide. Mom, Emma said one evening as we cooked dinner together, I've been thinking about what I want to study in college. What have you decided? I want to study criminal justice and specialize in military family protection law, Emma said. I want to be like Attorney Chen and Agent Porter, helping families fight back against people who try to hurt them. As I watched Emma planning her future career in protecting military families, I realized that Tony Vega's criminal enterprise had failed in every possible way. He had tried to steal our money, but instead we had recovered more than we lost. He had tried to break our family, but instead, we had become stronger. Most importantly, he had tried to make us victims, but instead, he had created advocates who would spend our lives protecting other families from exactly the kind of exploitation we had survived. 3 months after Tony Vega's sentencing, I watched Emma address a packed auditorium at the Portland Convention Center during the Northwest Military Family Support Conference. My 17-year-old daughter stood confidently at the podium, speaking to an audience of military spouses, family support coordinators, and federal investigators about recognizing and preventing financial exploitation. When my mom came home from deployment last Christmas, I had no idea that criminals had been stealing my college fund for months. Emma began, her voice steady and clear. I had been working at a coffee shop saving money for community college because I thought my family couldn't afford a real university. The audience listened intently as Emma described our family's experience with Tony Vega's operation. But instead of focusing on the trauma we had endured, Emma emphasized the strength we had discovered and the lessons we had learned about protecting other military families. What I learned from this experience is that military children have a responsibility to help protect each other. Emma continued, We know our communities better than anyone else, and we can recognize when families are struggling in ways that might indicate criminal targeting. After Emma's presentation, she was surrounded by military teenagers from across the region who wanted to learn how to start similar support groups in their own communities. I watched with pride as Emma shared resources and strategies for peer counseling and family advocacy. Emma, you've really found your calling, said Colonel Patricia Williams, the conference organizer. Have you considered applying for the Military Child Advocacy Scholarship Program? What's that? Emma asked. Colonel Williams explained that the Department of Defense had created a new scholarship program specifically for military children who demonstrated leadership in protecting and supporting military families. Recipients receive full tuition support for undergraduate and graduate studies in fields related to military family services. The scholarship includes internship opportunities with federal law enforcement agencies, military legal services, and family advocacy programs. Colonel Williams continued, "Based on your work with the support group and your family's experience with the federal investigation, you would be an ideal candidate." Emma looked at me with excitement. "Mom, could I really work with the FBI while I'm in college?" "Emma, I think you could do anything you set your mind to," I replied, remembering the scared teenager who had asked, "What money?" just a few months ago and comparing her to the confident advocate standing before me now. Over the following weeks, Emma worked on her scholarship application while continuing to expand her peer support network. She had created online resources that were being used by military children nationwide to identify and report potential financial exploitation of their families. "Mom, I got a call from Agent Porter today," Emma said one evening as we reviewed her scholarship essays together. "The FBI wants to interview me about developing peer reporting systems for military communities." "What kind of peer reporting systems?" I asked. "They want to create a confidential way for military children to report when they notice sudden changes in family financial situations that might indicate criminal targeting," Emma explained. "Kids notice things that adults miss, especially when families are trying to hide financial problems." Agent Porter visited us the following week to discuss Emma's potential role in developing protection systems for military families. "Emma, your support group model has been adopted by 15 military communities nationwide," Agent Porter said. "The peer counseling approach you developed helps families identify problems earlier and report them before significant damage occurs." "How many families have been helped so far?" Emma asked. "Your peer reporting network has helped us identify and stop criminal targeting of 23 military families over the past 3 months," Agent Porter replied. "Without early intervention, those families could have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars." I watched Emma's face light up as she realized the impact her work was having on protecting other military children. "Agent Porter, when I'm in college, could I work with your team during summers and breaks?" "Emma, if you're accepted into the Military Child Advocacy Scholarship Program, you would have the opportunity to work directly with federal investigators, military legal teams, and family protection specialists throughout your college career." Emma's scholarship application was accepted 2 months later, along with an offer to attend her preferred university with full financial support and guaranteed internship placements with federal law enforcement agencies. But perhaps more meaningful than the scholarship was the letter Emma received from Sarah Morrison and the other military children whose families had been targeted by Tony Vega's operation. "Emma, your support group saved our family," Sarah wrote. "When you helped me understand that my parents weren't failing financially but were being targeted by criminals, it helped all of us heal and move forward. Thank you for turning your family's trauma into protection for other families." The letters came from military children across the country who had benefited from Emma's advocacy work and peer support resources. Each letter reinforced Emma's commitment to her chosen career path in military family protection. "Mom, I've been thinking about what I want to accomplish in college and beyond," Emma said one evening as we planned her freshman year schedule. "What are your goals, sweetheart?" "I want to become a federal prosecutor specializing in crimes against military families," Emma said. "But I also want to continue developing peer support systems that help military children protect each other." "Those are ambitious goals," I said, "but I know you can achieve them." "Mom, there's something else I want to do," Emma continued. "I want to write a book about our family's experience and how military families can fight back against financial predators." I thought about everything Emma had been through and how she had transformed from a confused victim into a powerful advocate for military families. "Emma, I think that book could help a lot of families. I want to call it Fighting Back a Military Family's Guide to Defeating Financial Predators." Emma said. It would include practical advice for recognizing targeting legal resources for fighting back, and stories from families who have successfully protected themselves. As I watched Emma planning her book project while preparing for college, I realized that Tony Vega's attempt to destroy our family had accidentally created something far more powerful than he could have imagined. Emma had discovered that her own trauma could become a source of strength and protection for other military children. She had learned that victims could become advocates and that individual families could work together to create systemic change that protected entire communities. Most importantly, Emma had learned that military families are never truly alone when they choose to fight back together. 6 months after Tony Vega's sentencing, our family reached a turning point that required difficult conversations about forgiveness, accountability, and the future of our relationships. I had been attending family therapy with my parents and Jessica working through the complex dynamics that had allowed our family to become vulnerable to criminal exploitation in the first place. "Sue, I understand why you're angry with us," my father said during one of our therapy sessions. "I made choices that put Emma's future at risk, and I let my addiction cloud my judgment about what was best for our family." "Dad, it's not just about the gambling," I replied. "It's about the fact that you, Mom, and Jessica all chose to hide the truth from me while I was deployed and vulnerable. You made decisions about my life and Emma's future without including us in those decisions." Dr. Sarah Mitchell, our family therapist, had been helping us navigate these conversations with professional guidance. "Harold, can you help Sue understand what was driving your decision-making process during that period?" My father took a deep breath before answering. "I was ashamed of the gambling, and I was terrified that if Sue found out, it would affect her security clearance or her military career. I thought I could fix everything before she came home." "But you didn't just hide the gambling," I pointed out. "You actively participated in schemes to steal my deployment money and Emma's college fund." "I convinced myself that I was borrowing the money temporarily," my father said quietly. "The gambling sites made everything seem so easy to win back, and Tony's people reinforced that belief." My mother spoke up from her chair across the therapy office. "Sue, I knew Harold was making poor choices, but I was too afraid to challenge him or contact you while you were deployed. Mom, you enabled Dad's choices by covering for him and keeping his secrets," I said. "You helped hide the truth from Emma and me." Dr. Mitchell guided us through establishing new family boundaries that would allow for healing while ensuring accountability. "Sue, what do you need from your parents and Jessica to feel safe rebuilding relationships with them?" "I need complete financial transparency," I said without hesitation. "No family financial decisions get made without discussing them with everyone involved. No more secrets about money. No more hiding debts or problems." "I can agree to that," my father said. "I've been attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings for 4 months now, and part of my recovery involves complete honesty about financial matters." "What else do you need, Sue?" Dr. Mitchell asked. "I need Jessica to understand that her role in this situation was not just passive victimization," I said, looking directly at my sister. "Jessica made active choices to betray our family's trust, and I need her to take responsibility for that." Jessica had been participating in individual therapy to address her own financial decision-making patterns and the shame that had driven her desperate choices. "Sue, I understand that I initiated the contact with Tony's organization, and I understand that my choices put Emma in danger. Jessica understanding is not the same as taking responsibility," I said firmly. "I need to hear you acknowledge the specific ways your choices harmed our family." Jessica took several minutes to compose her response. "Sue, I contacted criminals and gave them detailed information about our family's vulnerabilities. I signed documents that gave them legal authority to steal your military benefits. I participated in schemes to hide the truth from you while you were serving overseas and couldn't protect yourself or Emma." "And what impact did those choices have on Emma specifically?" I asked. My choices cost Emma her college fund and forced her to work to save money for education that should have been provided for her. Jessica said, tears flowing down her face. My choices also put Emma in physical danger by exposing her to criminals who were willing to threaten children to collect debt. Dr. Mitchell helped us establish ongoing accountability measures that would allow our family relationships to heal without repeating the patterns that had made us vulnerable to exploitation. Sue, what kind of ongoing relationship do you want with your parents? And Jessica, Dr. Mitchell asked. I want relationships that are based on truth and mutual respect, I said. I want family gatherings where Emma feels safe and valued, and I want to be able to trust that my family members will make decisions that consider the welfare of everyone involved, not just their own immediate needs. My father had completed gambling addiction treatment and was working with a financial counselor to manage his recovery. Sue, I want to make amends for what I cost Emma. I've arranged to transfer my remaining retirement savings to Emma's college fund as partial restitution for the money I lost. Dad, that's not necessary, I said. Emma's education is fully funded through the criminal recovery money and her scholarship. It's necessary for my recovery, my father replied. I need to make concrete amends for the specific harm I caused. Dr. Mitchell helped us develop a family recovery plan that included regular check-ins, continued therapy, and shared activities that would allow us to rebuild trust gradually. Sue, your family has been through severe trauma, but you've also demonstrated remarkable resilience, Dr. Mitchell said. The key to long-term healing will be maintaining the honest communication patterns you've established and continuing to prioritize Emma's emotional security. Over the following months, our family slowly developed new traditions based on transparency and mutual support. We established monthly family meetings where we discussed financial situations, life changes, and any concerns or problems anyone was experiencing. Emma participated in these family meetings with the confidence of someone who knew she would never again be excluded from decisions that affected her life. I want everyone to know that I'm proud of how our family fought back against those criminals, Emma said during one of our meetings. But I'm even more proud of how we're choosing to be honest with each other now. Jessica continued her community service work with military family support organizations, channeling her experience with financial manipulation into education that helped other families avoid similar exploitation. Sue, I know that earning back your trust is going to be a long process, Jessica said, but I want you to know that helping other military families has become the most meaningful work I've ever done. My parents attended Gamblers Anonymous meetings together and worked with financial counselors to develop healthy money management strategies. They also volunteered with military family support groups, sharing their experience about recognizing and resisting financial manipulation. Sue, we can't undo the choices we made, my mother said, but we can use our experience to help protect other military families from the kind of targeting we fell victim to. As I watch my family members taking concrete steps to rebuild our relationships while also protecting other military families, I realized that healing from betrayal required more than just forgiveness. It required transformation of the patterns and dynamics that had allowed the betrayal to occur in the first place. Our family was not just recovering from criminal victimization. We were learning to function as a family that prioritized truth, accountability, and mutual protection in ways we had never achieved before the crisis forced us to examine our relationships honestly. 1 year after Tony Vega's arrest, I stood in the Pentagon briefing room addressing senior military leadership about the family protection programs that had emerged from our case. The Deputy Secretary of Defense had requested a comprehensive report on military family financial exploitation, and our family's experience had become a case study in effective resistance and recovery. Ladies and gentlemen, the Patterson case demonstrates that individual military families can successfully fight back against systematic criminal targeting, but only when they have access to proper resources and support systems. I explained to the assembled generals and admirals, Defense Secretary Jennifer Martinez reviewed the impact statistics that Agent Porter and I had compiled. Sergeant Patterson, your family's cooperation with federal investigators has led to the prosecution of 37 defendants and the recovery of over $8 million for victimized military families nationwide. More importantly, ma'am, the peer support systems that Emma developed have been adopted by over 50 military communities, creating early warning networks that prevent criminal targeting before families suffer significant losses. The Secretary of Defense opened a folder containing commendation documents. Sergeant Patterson, the President, has authorized me to present you with the Defense Meritorious Service Medal for your exceptional service in protecting military families from criminal exploitation. I accepted the medal with mixed emotions, knowing that the recognition was meaningful, but that the real victory was in the families who had been protected from experiencing what we had gone through. Sergeant Patterson, we understand that your daughter Emma has also made significant contributions to military family protection. Secretary Martinez continued, Yes, ma'am. Emma's peer reporting network and support group model have become standard protocols for military family advocates nationwide. We'd like to recognize Emma's service as well. That afternoon, Emma joined me at the Pentagon for a special ceremony recognizing military family advocates who had made exceptional contributions to community protection. Emma, now 18 and in her freshman year of college, had matured into a confident leader whose work was having national impact. Emma Patterson, your innovative approach to peer support and early reporting has helped protect military families across the country, Secretary Martinez said as she presented Emma with a civilian service commendation. Your work demonstrates that military children can be powerful advocates for their own communities. After the Pentagon ceremony, Emma and I visited the FBI headquarters where Agent Porter showed us the results of the ongoing investigation that had grown out of our case. Sergeant Patterson, the network we uncovered through your family's cooperation has led to federal prosecutions in 12 states. Agent Porter explained, We've identified and shut down systematic targeting operations that were affecting over 200 military families. What's the current status of the financial recovery efforts? I asked. Every military family that was victimized by Tony Vega's network has received full financial recovery, plus additional federal compensation, Agent Porter replied. Total recovery amount exceeds $12 million. Emma reviewed the impact charts that Agent Porter had prepared for our visit. Agent Porter, how many military children have been helped by the peer support programs? Emma, your support group model is currently serving over 800 military children nationwide, Agent Porter said, but the early reporting system you developed has helped us prevent criminal targeting of an estimated 1,500 additional families. 1,500 families, Emma repeated quietly. That's 1,500 families who didn't have to go through what we went through. The following week, Emma and I were invited to speak at the National Military Family Association annual conference, addressing an audience of over 2,000 military spouses, advocates, and support professionals. When my mom came home from deployment and asked me about the money she had been sending, I had no idea that my confused answer would trigger a federal investigation, Emma told the audience. But I learned that military families have incredible power when we choose to fight back together. Emma's presentation focused on the importance of peer support networks and the unique ability of military children to recognize and report potential criminal targeting of their families. Military kids see things that adults miss, Emma explained. We notice when our friends' families suddenly change their spending patterns, when parents start working extra jobs for unexplained reasons, or when families begin avoiding social activities due to financial stress. During the question and answer session, military spouses from across the country asked Emma about implementing similar support programs in their communities. The key is creating safe spaces where military children can talk about family financial stress without feeling like they're betraying their parents, Emma answered. Most kids want to help their families, but they need guidance about how to recognize criminal targeting versus normal financial challenges. After the conference, Emma and I received a request from the Department of Defense to develop a comprehensive training program for military family advocates based on our experience and the programs Emma had created. Mom, they want us to travel to military bases nationwide, teaching other families how to protect themselves and fight back against financial predators, Emma said excitedly. Emma, that would mean spending our summers visiting military communities and helping them develop protection systems. I can't think of anything I'd rather do with my college breaks, Emma replied. Over the following months, Emma and I developed curriculum materials for military family protection training, combining my investigative experience with Emma's peer advocacy expertise. Our training program included modules on recognizing criminal targeting, federal legal resources, family communication strategies, and community support network development. Sergeant Patterson, your family's transformation from victims to advocates represents exactly the kind of resilience we want to cultivate in military communities nationwide, said General Patricia Foster, who supervised military family readiness programs. General, what we've learned is that individual military families are vulnerable to systematic targeting, but military communities that work together to protect each other become nearly impossible for criminals to exploit successfully. I replied. Emma added, the criminals count on military families being isolated and ashamed when they experience financial problems. But when military children have networks where they can safely discuss family challenges, the isolation disappears and the criminals lose their primary advantage. As Emma and I planned our first summer of traveling to military bases for family protection training, I reflected on how completely our lives had changed since that Christmas morning, when Emma asked, "What money?" Tony Vega had tried to destroy our family by exploiting our separation and vulnerabilities. Instead, he had accidentally created a family of advocates whose mission was protecting other military families from exactly the kind of targeting we had survived. Our trauma had become our purpose, and our recovery had become a resource for families nationwide who were facing similar challenges. 2 years after that Christmas morning, when Emma asked, "What money?" I stood in a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., watching as the final defendants in Tony Vega's criminal network received their sentences. The lead judge in the case, Chief Judge Robert Harrison, addressed the packed courtroom with words that brought closure to our long journey toward justice. The defendants in this case operated a systematic criminal enterprise specifically designed to exploit American military families during their most vulnerable moments, Judge Harrison stated. They targeted the children and spouses of deployed soldiers using sophisticated psychological manipulation and fraudulent documentation to steal millions of dollars from families who were serving our nation. Tony Vega himself had already been serving his 18-year sentence in federal prison, but today's hearing involved the corrupt military base financial advisors, bankruptcy attorneys, and online gambling operators who had been part of his network. The court finds that these crimes represent a particularly heinous form of betrayal, targeting the very families who sacrifice for our national security. Judge Harrison continued, the sentences imposed today reflect the seriousness of these offenses and the need to deter others from similar criminal conduct. The final defendant, a bankruptcy attorney named William Foster, who had been feeding client information to Tony's organization, received a 12-year sentence plus restitution requirements. With his sentencing, the last piece of the criminal network that had targeted our family was finally behind bars. Emma, now 19 and in her sophomore year at Portland State University, sat beside me in the courtroom gallery. She had taken time away from her criminal justice studies to witness the conclusion of the case that had changed our family's life so dramatically. "Mom, is it really over?" Emma whispered as the judge concluded the sentencing proceedings. "Yes, sweetheart, it's finally over." After the hearing, Attorney Chen met with us in the courthouse lobby to discuss the final resolution of our case and its broader impact on military family protection. Sergeant Patterson, this investigation has resulted in the prosecution of 43 defendants across 9 states. Attorney Chen said. The total recovery for victimized military families exceeds $15 million. More importantly, added Agent Porter, who had joined us for the final hearing, the protection systems your family helped develop have prevented an estimated 3,000 military families from being targeted by similar criminal operations. Emma pulled out a folder containing letters from military children whose families had been protected by the peer support networks she had established. Agent Porter, I wanted to share some of the impact stories we've received from military communities nationwide. The letters came from teenagers across the country whose families had been approached by financial predators, but had recognized the danger early enough to avoid victimization. Each letter represented a family that had been spared the trauma and financial devastation that we had experienced. Emma, your work has literally changed how the military protects its families, Agent Porter said. The Department of Defense has adopted your peer reporting model as standard protocol for all military installations. What does that mean exactly? Emma asked. It means that every military base in the United States now has trained military children who know how to recognize and report potential criminal targeting of military families, Attorney Chen explained. Your support group model has become official military family readiness policy. As we left the courthouse, Emma and I reflected on the incredible journey that had begun with her simple question about money that was supposed to be helping with her college expenses. Mom, do you ever think about what our lives would be like if I hadn't asked about the money that day? Emma wondered. I think about it sometimes, I replied. Tony Vega's people would probably still be operating targeting other military families, and we never would have known how strong we could be when we fought back together. Emma smiled as she thought about the alternative timeline. And I never would have discovered my passion for protecting military families or met all the amazing people I've worked with through this experience. Over the past 2 years, Emma had developed into a nationally recognized advocate for military family protection. Her college coursework in criminal justice was supplemented by internships with the FBI Military Legal Services and family advocacy organizations. She had already been accepted into the accelerated law program that would allow her to begin law school after her junior year. Emma, have you decided on your specialization for law school? I asked as we drove home from the courthouse. I want to specialize in federal prosecution of crimes against military families, Emma said without hesitation. I want to be like Attorney Chen, building cases that protect military children and bring criminals to justice. That's a challenging career path, sweetheart. Mom, after everything our family has been through, I can't imagine doing anything else. This work feels like my calling. That evening, Emma and I cooked dinner together while discussing her plans for the upcoming summer, which would include traveling to military bases nationwide to train military families in protection and advocacy techniques. Mom, I got a call from Colonel Williams today, Emma said as she chopped vegetables for our salad. The Military Family Protection Initiative wants to offer me a permanent position after law school. What kind of position? I would be the lead prosecutor for the new federal task force that investigates crimes specifically targeting military families, Emma explained. It would be based here in Oregon, but I'd travel to work on cases nationwide. I stopped stirring the pasta sauce and looked at my daughter, who had grown from a confused teenager into a powerful advocate for military families in just 2 years. Emma, that sounds like an incredible opportunity. The best part is that I'd be working directly with families like ours, helping them fight back against criminals and recover from financial exploitation. As I watched Emma planning her career in military family protection, I realized that Tony Vega's criminal enterprise had failed in every conceivable way. He had tried to steal our money, but we had recovered more than we lost. He had tried to break our family relationships, but we had developed stronger bonds based on truth and mutual support. He had tried to exploit Emma's youth and vulnerability, but instead, he had awakened a fierce advocate who would spend her career protecting other military children. Most importantly, he had tried to make us victims, but he had accidentally created a family of protectors whose work would shield thousands of other military families from the exploitation we had survived. "Emma, I'm proud of who you've become," I said as we sat down for dinner together. "Mom, I'm proud of our whole family," Emma replied. "We took something terrible and turned it into something that helps other people. That's pretty amazing." After dinner, Emma worked on her college assignments while I reviewed case files for my own work with the Military Family Financial Protection Unit. Our dining room table had become a workspace where we both contributed to protecting military families from criminal exploitation. "Mom, can I ask you something?" Emma said, looking up from her criminal law textbook. "Of course." "Do you think other military families could learn from our experience about how to fight back when bad things happen?" I thought about the hundreds of families we had worked with over the past 2 years and how many of them had discovered their own strength through the process of fighting back against people who tried to exploit them. "Emma, I think our family's story shows that military families are much stronger than criminals expect us to be. When we work together and refuse to be victims, we can overcome almost anything. And we can help other families discover their own strength too," Emma added. As Emma returned to her studies and I reviewed my own case files, I reflected on how our family had been transformed by the experience of fighting back against people who tried to destroy us. We had learned that military families are never truly alone when they choose to support each other. We had discovered that trauma could become purpose and that recovery could become a resource for protecting others. Most importantly, we had proven that criminals who target military families make one critical miscalculation. They assume that deployed soldiers and their families are isolated and helpless. But military families are part of a community that protects its own, and when that community is awakened to fight back, it becomes an unstoppable force for justice and protection. So now I want to ask all of you who are listening to our story, have you or your family ever experienced financial pressure that seemed to come out of nowhere? Have you noticed sudden changes in other military families that might indicate they're being targeted by financial predators? If our story sounds familiar to your own experience, please don't suffer in silence the way our family did. Share our story with other military families who might need to hear it. Like this video if it helped you understand how to recognize and fight back against financial exploitation. Subscribe to stay updated on military family protection resources. And please comment below to share your own experiences or ask questions about protecting your family from financial predators. Thank you for listening to our family's story, and remember that military families are strongest when we protect each other. Stay safe, stay strong, and never let anyone convince you that you're alone in fighting back against people who try to exploit your service and sacrifice.